There weren't many, but those flying off on holiday this morning were taking a gamble.
Were you happy taking that risk?
Yes,
that you
yes, we always do. Yeah.
Just needed a holiday that much?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the kids are happy.
Happy to be off on holiday, even happier that by mid-flight the government announced passengers returning from dozens of countries to England will not have to quarantine from next week. For 4 weeks there was a blanket rule. Today the Prime Minister introduced nuance.
Instead of quarantining arrivals from the whole world, we will only quarantine arrivals from those countries where the virus is sadly not yet under control.
From next Friday, travellers returning to England from 59 countries will be exempt from quarantine. The list includes most of the EU. France, Germany, Italy, Spain and Greece also makes the list, despite the fact it currently has its own restriction on UK arrivals. But the 14-day quarantine remains in place for countries yet to agree reciprocal travel arrangements like China, and for countries where infection rates are deemed too high like Portugal, Brazil and the United States. The travel industry breathed a sigh of relief today, but this is a decision which has been delayed multiple times. A decision that only covers England, a decision without universal support.
We can't allow ourselves to be dragged along in the wake of another government's, to be quite frank about it, shambolic decision-making process.
A sentiment echoed and expanded upon by the Welsh First Minister.
Dealing with the UK government over the last few days has been an utterly shambolic experience. If ever there was an example of making an announcement first and then trying to work out what you meant by it, that is what we have seen since this announcement was first trailed in the press.
An assessment Boris Johnson disagreed with.
The convoy is really going in very much the same direction, maybe at slightly different speeds.
So, as of next week, dozens of countries will now be exempt from quarantine measures. A massive relief to the airline industry, an industry that has been shedding thousands of jobs on a weekly basis. But no one in the industry is expecting a stampede of passengers now. In fact, most are predicting it could take up to 2 years before their business will return to what they were just a few months ago before coronavirus.
The criticism from some in the sector is that the policy to quarantine so late into the pandemic just wasn't backed by the science. And for travellers landing before next Friday, it's a policy they still have to stick to.
Are you going to be quarantining now?
I will be, yes.
How seriously are you taking it?
Because it's against the law not to.
How seriously are you taking it?
Very seriously in that respect, because I have to.
I believe, I think it should be reduced now. It's gone on long enough, isn't it?
So you don't think you should be quarantining now?
No, not at all.
But will you be?
Probably not. Who knows? Maybe. I'm being honest.
That's a no, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a no, yeah. Pub's open tomorrow, so let's see how it goes, isn't it?
The government has maintained that any restrictions relaxed can be reviewed and reinstated should they need to. For now, though, a holiday abroad this summer has got much simpler.
You happy about going on holiday?
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to most?
The coronavirus to go away, so I can go to that pool in my grandma's house.
As travel gets easier and bars prepare to open up tomorrow, the Prime Minister trialled a new slogan today: enjoy summer safely. The question for many businesses relying on tourists to the UK: will they make enough money to survive the summer, let alone enjoy it?
Look, today's decision might be a welcome one, but there's been an awful lot going on behind the scenes here. We were expecting a decision to be made on Monday, then we expect an announcement late at some point during the week. Now we get to Friday, and even today, sources in the Scottish Government saying to us that the list of countries on that safe list was still changing up until a couple of hours before it was finally announced. Then there are still questions about those differences between England, Scotland and Wales. How exactly is it going to be policed? What is there to stop someone landing at Heathrow and then driving home to Wales? At the moment, it looks like pretty much nothing.
Thanks very much, Paul. Well, we're not out of the woods yet. That is the message from the Prime Minister ahead of the moment when pubs, bars and restaurants in England will be allowed to reopen tomorrow. There will still be restrictions to ensure people maintain social distancing, and the rules vary across the nations. Today, Northern Irish pubs and bars are opening, but you can only have a drink inside if you're eating a meal. From Monday, Scottish venues with outside space will be allowed to open. Indoor venues will reopen on July 15th. Nearly 70,000 people work in the hospitality industry in Wales, where pubs and restaurants with outdoor space can open from July the 13th, as long as the number of cases of COVID-19 is continuing to fall. And tonight, a stark warning from the Chief Medical Officer. If people and businesses don't stick to social distancing rules, there's a real risk of a second wave. Minnie Stevenson has been in Stratford-upon-Avon to find out how they feel about this gradual opening up.
My message is, let's not blow it now, folks. We've done a fantastic job so far in bearing down on this disease collectively, that we're now able to carefully and cautiously to open up.
Sobering words from the Prime Minister today on the eve of so-called Super Saturday in England.
Ultimately, the economic health of the whole country is dependent on every single one of us acting responsibly.
The pubs open tomorrow at 6 a.m, but be measured is the message. Or as Shakespeare more poetically put it, can one desire too much of a good thing? We shall see. In Stratford-upon-Avon, they're grappling with their own Shakespearean tragedy. With their most famous son's theatre company closed, usually the beating heart of the town, tourism and the local economy has been decimated here. Until tomorrow, they hope, when the hospitality industry comes out of hibernation in England.
Backup house and staff area procedures and how to maintain and use the thermometers.
In the not-so-ye-olde Wetherspoons on the High Street, where the Golden Bee staff are having a different type of lock-in, training for those first orders. The punters already eager, but put aside any nostalgic ideas you may have about popping out for a pint. Think more military operation.
We'll encourage them to sanitise their hands, and then when they come in, before they get to enter the bar, they'll have to fill out a form for the track and trace system with their name and number.
OK, Emily, I'm anti-backed. I've left my name and number already. And off we
then
go?
we just go to the bar, yeah. All the floors are marked 1 metre apart. You'll come to the bar, order your drink, and then just take a seat at the table. We've got no sports subscriptions throughout July. We're not showing any sporting events at all. Obviously, just trying to get people to order through the app. Not being able to just come in and meet your friends, like you can only come in with people from 2 households, so I think it will be really different.
Wow. It's quite a different trip to the pub.
I know, it's not the same, I know.
Do you think, once people have had a couple of drinks and they potentially could get a bit rowdy, that they're going to be staying alert?
I think it will be quite challenging for people, but obviously I think with all the staff, like, you know, they are well trained, hopefully they'll be able to keep on top of it, so there'll be no issues.
But for Jan and Michael, sitting quietly on a bench has become the new beer garden. It's a little bit chilly. Are you excited about the pubs opening tomorrow? Will you be heading down there to have an indoor pint?
Not really, no.
Really, why not?
No. It's, I think it'll get out of control eventually.
Will you be heading to the pub tomorrow?
No.
Oh, straight away, why not?
Just, I don't think it's safe still.
Really?
Because of how crowded they can get. No. Especially when everyone's drunk. You know, they've had a few drinks and they get really close to each other.
Restaurants also return tomorrow in England to a depleted high street, with Café Rouge and Bella Italia announcing more than 90 restaurants would close yesterday. This establishment is still standing, 500 years on. It would usually be Hotel Indigo's busiest time, but with the theatre closed, manager Carl will take only being 50% full tomorrow. What will people not be able to do?
There's some limited items that were what we would normally put in bedrooms, for example, minibars. Some items we would have removed and are available upon request instead, but everything you would have had before we still offer, just slightly differently, as opposed to just having it all out there for everyone to tuck in, particularly breakfast buffets. So we'll be moving to more plated options and takeaway options and room service and promoting that a bit more.
And when in Stratford-upon-Avon, we should mention the other unsung stars of the town, albeit less internationally known, down at the Butterfly Farm, one of many tourist attractions opening to the public tomorrow. Here residents seem to be already embracing Free Flight Friday. They've released over 500 butterflies. After months in lockdown, they'll fly out into the world. Like many, perhaps feeling a little more fragile.
Well, as the government's chief scientific advisor warned, this is absolutely not a risk-free next step, and that's why social distancing remains critical, he said. Joining us now is the chef Angela Hartnett, who's at one of her restaurants in London Bridge. It's due to open to customers later this month. Angela Hartnett, I'm standing outside in the rain. People are still so desperate for a drink and a bit of social interaction that they are bunched up in the porches of the pubs down the road. There's not a lot of social distancing going on. How easy is it going to be, do you think, when you reopen, to get people to follow the rules?
I think you've got to be guided by looking after your teams and looking after your guests. At the end of the day, you want your customers to feel comfortable. I think those people coming out have got that sort of let's go attitude, and they want to sort of get Britain going, get the economy moving. So I think it's our duty as operators to make sure that we look after them when they come into our establishments, and that also our teams are protected, because they're equally as important. And I think, with the government relaxing the 1 metre rule, that really has helped now that we can get tables back. But, there's still so much more the government can do, essentially in London, to really push the economy and push tourism back in and make sure the message is clear that London is open, it's a safe environment. But, we have to encourage people now who feel like they want to come out, and we're going to make sure we look after them when they do.
Well, I mean, how easy is it going to be to get the hospitality industry back to some kind of normality? I mean, are we still going to see closures and job losses, or is it going to just spring back, do you think, because people are so desperate for it?
I don't think it's going to spring back. I don't think it's a silver bullet that suddenly we all everywhere. Certainly already we've seen lots of redundancies, we've seen lots of closures happen. I think now it's not so much, we had the scheme, which has been great, and it's extended to October, which is fantastic. I think now for certain restaurants and certain establishments, there has to be a stimulus package from the government. They've got to look at the VAT rates, they've got to look at business rates, they've got to make sure that it's just not, well, actually, now they're open, now they can get on with it. Because as soon as you open, landlords want rent. If you're operating on 50%, you're not making the money to pay that 100% rent. So there's still lots more the government can do. And certainly from my restaurants in London, the mayor has to really come out now and support us. We've got to look at the transport system. Personally, I would think get rid of this congestion charge. I think that is not going to help us over the next few months, that it's now gone up and it now
that's obviously just a London issue. And we've got to think sort of nationwide. I mean, what about tourism? I mean, how reliant on foreign visitors is the hospitality industry? And do you think lifting the quarantine restrictions on so many countries will start to see people coming back in again?
I hope it will, actually, because I think certainly going into the month of August, which most restaurants do, we rely on the tourism industry. We rely on tourists coming into London, going to all our different venues and looking at different shows, theatres. They're all closed, obviously. Going to museums, hopefully they're going to be open and people can attend them. But that's a huge part of the people that come in August, September, into the cities, into the UK. And we need to do everything we can to encourage them. They've lifted the quarantine, which is great. They need to make sure that when people come in, they feel safe, that they're looked after, and just do everything to sort of bring back people back into the country, I think.
Angela Hartnett, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, in Northern Ireland, pubs, hotels and restaurants reopened their doors today, although there are big changes, including protective equipment for staff, restrictions on serving alcohol indoors and no standing at the bar. Porrick O'Brien is in Belfast.
Krish, welcome to the rooftop bar at the Bullet Hotel in the centre of Belfast. At midday today, pubs, restaurants and cafes opened up across Northern Ireland. Now, not all of them opened up, and of course not everyone came out. Still a certain level of sensible wariness in some sections of the population. But it felt like quite a moment, to be honest, a moment for family and friends to just come up out of lockdown for a few hours and get some air, basically. Purely as spectators, we went on our very own spectacularly dry pub crawl of Belfast today. Here is what we found.
Today at midday, the pubs in Northern Ireland opened after months and months of lockdown.
Hello, pub! Daddy's home!
We went on a pub crawl in Belfast today and bumped into comedian Tim McGarry, who was filming at the Northern Wig Bar.
There's a huge social function to the pubs. This is where people go to celebrate, people go to commiserate, people go to meet their friends and their families. And this is something that is essential to our very core, our very being. We genuinely really miss the pubs.
At 5 to 12, we were at the Dirty Onion.
So we're here 15 minutes early, front of the queue, looking forward to it. About time, 3 months I'm waiting.
So it's just gone midday. We're in the Dirty Onion, and a small moment of history for Belfast. The doors just about to open. OK, so the opening lacked a little fanfare, to be honest, because, as with many pubs opening today, there was a pre-drink safety demonstration. Hand sanitizer, a one-way system, table allocation. You have to order food when sitting inside. But finally, a tiny symbolic glimpse of a post-lockdown world.
I was actually in my work yesterday just finding out when sort of they expect me to be back and stuff, and it's probably going to be another month or two before I'm back to work. But you're sitting at home, 23 hours out of the day, the only time you're allowed out is to go to the shop. It's going to get to you and stuff, and your mental health does suffer.
And with that, a sup of sauce.
Good judge. We estimate somewhere in the region of 30 to 40% of restaurants may not come back from this.
Really, 30 to 40%?
Yeah, huge. I mean, same with our pubs, 10 to 15%, hotels maybe 15 to 20. This is the start of a very difficult and long journey, and it really is about getting up to a level where we can stop losing money as quickly as possible, but looking after everyone's safety at the same time.
Some difficult questions. Will social distancing be maintained as the pints line up? Will there be a spike in problematic drinking? But today didn't feel like the day for those questions. The institution that is Cassidy's Antrim Road.
And if everybody's responsible enough, and because the worst thing we want to be doing is, God forbid, a couple of weeks down the line, something happening, i.e. Leicester, leaking pockets in the south and stuff like that. But it's just up to everybody to be responsible. We all know what it is. If you don't know what it is, you've been on another planet, you know what I mean? And just, just everybody do their bit, and hopefully we can all get out of this together.
So today, some Northern Irish people had a drink, held court, and even got back to complaining about something else for a change.
You remember the fun subjects like Brexit? Oh, Brexit, fuck. Let's get back to Brexit and a border in the Irish Sea and Larne being a border post and annoying Sammy Wilson. That's what I want to get back to.
Right, well, that's
Well, let's talk now to Dr. Natalie McDermott, a specialist in infectious diseases at King's College London. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. We know that the government is trying to balance the public health risks with the danger to the economy. Do you think they've got it right?
Well, I think you're right. It's about finding a balance. It's also about finding a balance for people's emotional and mental well-being. And socialising is obviously an important part of that. I don't think they've necessarily got it wrong, but I think time will tell as to whether this works or not and whether we see a surge. What's important is, as was said in the last message, that everybody plays their part and does their best to maintain social distancing. If we all crowd into pubs and buy drinks and get drunk and become disinhibited and start interacting very closely with one another, we will almost certainly see a surge in cases. So it's important that we all play our part and maintain social distancing whilst also trying to enjoy the summer and have a drink at the pub.
But the messaging is and has always been really important, hasn't it? And the Prime Minister said today this was about cautiously reopening the hospitality sector. Opening pubs at 6 a.m. on a summer Saturday doesn't scream caution to me. What about you?
Well, I suppose if you're opening them at 6 a.m, potentially you have less crowding of the pub because you don't have everyone descending on it at 6 p.m. if that was the time. But I guess a time has to be set at some point for them to reopen. And it's about the owners of the pubs and the restaurants to try and manage any crowds that might appear and try and enforce or at least assist with social distancing by the measures that they've put in place within their venue.
As you say, the message has been that, to individuals to enjoy summer responsibly. Do you think it is difficult to judge responsibility, individual responsibility, if the messaging is vague?
Certainly, it's very important that the messaging has to be very, very clear. And sometimes that means it needs to be absolutely spelled out exactly what you can and cannot do. Because I think any level of ambiguity or vagueness leads to people's own interpretation of that, and also might lead to people interpreting that the situation is not as serious as it actually is.
And do you think that's a danger at the moment?
Well, I think people have been hearing the message for many months now, but I think it's important that we keep that message clear, that we keep the message clear that coronavirus is not gone from the UK. It is still very much present in the UK. And if we have too much social interaction and if we breach the guidance on social distancing and wearing masks when social distancing is not possible, we will almost certainly see a second wave. It's in the public's best interest that we honour those guidelines, because then we're likely to see the pubs stay open. If we see a surge in cases within a matter of weeks, the government may well close the pubs and restaurants again.
Dr. Natalie McDermott, thanks very much for talking to us this evening. Thank you.
Now, new figures have been released which show for the first time the total number of care home residents in England and Wales whose deaths are linked to coronavirus. The analysis by the Office for National Statistics shows that from the 2nd of March to the 12th of June, more than 19,000 care home residents died from COVID-19. Around 3/4 of these residents died in their care home, and just under a quarter died in hospital. The data shows that almost 30,000 more care home residents in England and Wales died during the outbreak than during the same period last year. From Monday, care homes in England will carry out routine testing of residents and staff. Now, one city where lockdown restrictions won't be eased yet is Leicester, where police say they've deployed more officers on the streets than during a typical New Year's Eve. But the Leicestershire force has only been given new powers to enforce the measures today, 4 days after the local lockdown was announced. Our Home Affairs correspondent Darshna Soni is on the border of the lockdown area.
Well, the rest of the country may be celebrating tomorrow, Krishnan. Not here, depending on where you live, because the houses on that side of the road aren't in the lockdown area, so they're free to go to the pub if they wish to. The houses there are in the lockdown area, so they'll have to comply by the new rules. Although some residents and businesses have said to us that there's still confusion about where exactly the border is. And if you take a look here, this roundabout is known locally as Fox Hunter Island. The cars on that side of the road that will be coming towards us in a minute, they are coming out of the lockdown area. The cars on the other side of the road are going into the lockdown area. What you may notice is that there are no stops, no police checks, because the police were only told today what powers they have to enforce this new lockdown. And those powers don't include roadblocks. What the police can do is tell you if you live over there, you can't meet in more than groups of 6, you can't go and stay at somebody else's house. And today I spoke to the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire, and he told me there's been too much of a delay in the police being able to clarify what powers they have exactly.
Yes, I have to say that there has been a lack of clarity over the last number of days, and now I think the position is much clearer, and it is vital that it's clear for the citizens who are involved. I'm happier about that. I think it makes the police's job easier than it would have been if we hadn't had that clarity. It's taken a long time to come.
That was the Police and Crime Commissioner talking to me about the secondary legislation that's been enacted today to enforce this new local lockdown. It's not just the police, though, who will be helping to enforce it. Today, Trading Standards said that they had shut down 2 non-essential shops in the North Evington area of Leicester. Now, that's an area that's seen the highest number of COVID cases since the new spike began. It's also an area where the council says it's had lots of complaints about people not sticking to the new rules. As well as those 2 shops, Trading Standards have said that there are another 288 businesses in North Evington that they are engaging with to make sure that they are COVID compliant. They say they are encouraging everybody to stick to the rules, although, as people here have said, there's nothing to stop them freely crossing the border.